Working from home, you feel so alone. Cabin fever's running high. 5 o'clock comes, it's happy hour, but all you do is sigh. When the cocktail hit the spot, it's time to just relax, mix up a bit of history. Go ahead, put the kids to bed, and please drink responsibly. Join me for happy hour history. Hey friends, Kim McCann here, program developer at Prairie, and your host for another episode of Happy Hour History, where we mix up historical cocktails and talk about alcohol-related history. Today in this episode, we are focusing on whiskey. Now, you might say, Kim, that bottle says bourbon. And so, yes, it does, because bourbon is whiskey. All bourbon is whiskey, but not all whiskey is bourbon. So what is whiskey? There are all different kinds of whiskey, and whiskey is a spirit that's derived from grain, not distilled above 190 proof. It's aged in new charred oak barrels, and then the distinctions end. Whiskey is made through several different processes. There's all kinds of whiskey. There's American whiskey, there's Tennessee whiskey, there is Scotch whiskey, there's Japanese whiskey, there is Canadian whiskey, Irish whiskey, but we are dealing today specifically with bourbon, which is kind of considered the true American spirit. The first thing that we're going to make today is a very old cocktail, and we're just going to start it out because this one needs a couple weeks to get itself together. This recipe is originally from, as far as we know, Martha Washington's own kitchen, and it was one of George Washington's favorites. In fact, he loved it so much that he packed a canteen of it when he crossed the Allegheny Mountains in 1748. We're going to make it we're going to make a pandemic version of this drink, Cherry Bounce. If you look at the original recipe, which I'll put a link at the end of the video for you to check out, it calls for, as the first ingredients, 10 to 11 pounds of Morello cherries, which you then have to pit and smash and juice. If you've ever pitted cherries, it's a lot of work. So I'm going a shortcut, and I am starting with cherry juice. I had black cherry juice, which is sweeter than a Morello cherry, which is sour. So what I've done is I've added some lemon juice to my cherry juice to make it a bit more tart. If you're going to use cherry juice, then you can use sweet cherry juice or tart cherry juice, and the amount of sugar that you add to it will change based on sweet or tart cherries. So what I have here is 1.5 cups of black cherry juice, to which I've added half a cup of sugar. Also added the juice of 1 lemon to bring that tartness up. If you were using tart cherry juice, you would add more sugar to sort of balance that tartness and not add any lemon juice. In addition to that, I've added a half a stick of cinnamon, 2 cloves, and a 1/4 inch slice of nutmeg. Don't use powdered nutmeg, use whole nutmeg, otherwise you're going to have to strain it or you'll have little floaties. I put all of that together, dissolved the sugar, and over the course of 24 to 48 hours, I let it steep so that the flavors of those spices could blend into the cherry juice. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an equal amount of bourbon to bring that amount up to 3 cups. That's a nice sound, isn't it? I lost track of my cup measures. Oh, there we go. If you go a little over with your bourbon, it's totally fine. It probably makes it better. So now, here's the thing. We have to let these flavors, this cherry and these spices and this wonderful bourbon, mix a little bit. You can use brandy, which the original recipe calls for. You can use Irish whiskey. You could use rum. We're using today bourbon from Hotel Tango Distillery right here in Indiana. It's a great time to drink local. And I think that the flavors of the bourbon, the smokiness and oakiness that comes from its process of being made, really is going to blend well with the cherries. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to put it into a nice decanter. Now you can use a jar, a large glass jar, just whatever you're putting it into, make sure that that container is clean. Because what we're going to do is we're going to let this mixture, this blend of cherry and spice and bourbon, we're going to let that sit for 2 weeks and in a cool, dry place. You can put it in your fridge if you want to. I'm going to set it out and we're going to come back to this in 2 weeks and we're going to make some cocktails with it and it's going to be amazing. But today we're also going to make some additional cocktails that you can drink right now. Let's get down to that. Today, in addition to the cherry bounce, we are going to make 2 cocktails that you can drink right now. Both of those cocktails are going to feature bourbon again. Now, we talked a little bit before about what exactly whiskey is, but what is the distinction about bourbon that makes it not just plain old American whiskey? The distinction is this. Bourbon needs to be 51% corn grain. It cannot be distilled above 160 proof, and it needs to be aged in new charred oak barrels. There's no minimum or maximum for the aging. It can be made in any state, but most people would probably say that the true bourbon comes from Kentucky. We're using good Indiana bourbon today, and it's mighty fine. So let's get down to business. The first cocktail that we're going to make is a whiskey smash. Now, a smash is a category of cocktail that's sort of the cousin of a julep in that it has mint and a base spirit, but it also has the addition of fruit, and in our case, that fruit is lemon. So a smash is a very simple cocktail, and it's surprisingly delicious and refreshing, and let's make one right now. So we're going to take a small whiskey glass, and we're going to take some fresh mint. Now, if you've got mint from the grocery store, that's great. If you've got mint growing outside, it's popping up, spring's happening, that's great. Use that too. So the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to put some mint into our whiskey glass here. Now, the original recipe for the whiskey smash calls for a teaspoon of sugar, 3 to 4 sprigs of mint, 2 teaspoons of water, and then your whiskey and ice. That's a lot of mint in my opinion. So I'm going to put 4 or 5 good-sized mint leaves in there. And then we're going to put in our teaspoon of sugar and use regular granulated sugar here. And then we're going to put in our water. Now, this is where we get the name smash. We're going to take a muddler and we are going to smash those mint leaves. So basically what we're doing is we are extracting the natural oils, the flavor of the mint, by smashing it down and using that sugar as, that sugar's working for us. It's going to help us grind that mint. Once we've got those mint leaves smashed, the directions call for us to add our lemon, which is going to make it different from a julep, right? Pop that in there. And then we are going to add our bourbon. So it calls for a wine glass, and as we talked about last time, a standard wine glass measurement in the 19th century is going to be 2 ounces. It calls for the glass to be filled up with crushed or shaved ice. I don't know about you. I don't have a big block of ice sitting around at my house. I don't even have an ice machine in my fridge. But what I do have is a hammer and some Ziploc bags and a towel. So if you fill up a Ziploc bag with a tray of ice cubes and wrap that in a towel and smash, use the broad side of the hammer, not the head, and just smash that up. And then if you'd like to, you can do what I did, since I don't have an ice bucket, just put it in the bottom of your food processor and make it look like you're an adult. So we're going to just fill up our glass here with our ice and give that a stir. Stir it well. And then we're gonna garnish it with the rest of that mint sprig that I had. Look at that. Doesn't that look nice? Very inviting. Let's have a taste. That is really nice. It's different from a julep. You still do get some of that refreshment and lift from the mint, but that lemon comes through and it mixes with the bourbon and the oaky, smoky goodness there. And smash. Well, I could drink all of that, but we don't have time right now. I'll get to it later. But what we will do right now is we'll get to our next drink. So I'm going to do a little clearing away through the magic of video here. All right, our final bourbon cocktail today is a sort of finicky one, but pretty interesting. It's called the Crusta, and it gets its name from a kind of weird place. So this involves a little bit of prep work, but it's kind of special, and so it's fun to make. The original recipe calls for a wine glass, and in the 1800s, a wine glass is more akin to what we call a cordial glass. I don't drink a lot of cordial, so I don't have a cordial glass, but I do have one of these small glasses. I think it's about 4 ounces. So what you want to do with the glass that you have, and it's okay to use the glass that you have. So what you want to do is take a cut of lemon, and on the rim of the glass, just rub that lemon to get lemon juice on it, and then dip it in some granulated sugar. Then let it sit, and it's going to crust up. Believe it or not, that's where the cocktail gets its name. So the other special preparation that you need to do, again, it's a little fiddly, but you're going to take a whole lemon, use a very sharp knife, but peel that lemon around the middle so that you have a large white strip. Now you're going to get some pith, and that's okay. Just take a knife or a spoon and scrape that pith out. That's the bitter part of the lemon. And you're going to take that lemon peel and you're going to insert it into your crusted glass so that it looks like this. I know it's kind of fiddly, but it's also kind of fun. So we're going to set that aside for right now and get down to mixing the actual drink. So we're going to use a shaker for this. If you don't have a shaker at home, that's okay. You can just mix it in a larger glass and stir it. But let me just say something a little bit about ice. Different kinds of ice are called for in different kinds of drinks. In most of the cocktails that are in Jerry Thomas's bartender's book, which is what we're using as reference, the cocktails are served with a small piece of ice or no ice at all, and it's pretty common for the time period. We are a refrigerated culture now. We like things cold, and so you can keep your cocktails as cold as you like. But as far as mixing them goes, when we're talking about shaking and stirring and crushed ice or cubed ice, it really does come down to the dilution of the alcohol in your drink. So when you're using shaved ice or crushed ice and then shaking, you're going to get a lot more water into your drink, and so it's going to bring down that alcohol content, and it does change the flavor a little bit, but not so much that you have to follow it to a T. Use your own instincts and bartend as you bartend at home. That's totally okay. We've got here our shaker, and I filled it with some of that hammer crushed ice. And we're going to add our ingredients. In the original recipe, it calls for 3 to 4 dashes of gum syrup, a dash of bitters, a wine glass of brandy. We're using whiskey to make a whiskey crusta, 2 dashes of curacao, a dash of lemon juice. Let's talk a little bit about gum syrup. Gum syrup is actually a simple syrup or a sugar syrup that is made with the addition of gum arabic. Gum arabic is a sap or resin from the acacia tree, and it is used as an emulsifier or a thickener. It's really intended to change the viscosity of a liquid or a food. And so as an additive, what it's going to do is it's going to help bring the liquors together, and it's going to change the mouthfeel a little bit. Now, gum arabic is a little difficult to come by. It's not impossible, but so instead what I've made it is substitute gum syrup, which is really just a jacked up simple syrup. Simple syrup is sugar and water, 1 part to 1 part, that's brought to a boil and then simmered until the sugar is dissolved. For gum syrup, what I've done is I've made a syrup that's 2 parts sugar to 1 part water. So it's a little thicker and it's going to bring up that mouthfeel the same way that gum arabic would. The other substitution that I'm making today is for curacao. Curacao is an orange liqueur. If you have blue curacao at home, you can use that, but it's going to change the color of your drink. And I don't recommend it because it's blue and it's difficult to drink blue things. But you could use Cointreau or triple sec. Those are both orange liqueurs. And today what I'm going to use is I'm going to use some orange cello from Hotel Tango, just like limoncello, except it's made with orange. It's really delicious. And it's a great substitute for things like Cointreau or triple sec or curacao if you don't have them, or if you'd like to use that instead when you're making another cocktail. So we're going to get all of our ingredients added together. We're going to start with our lemon juice. And then we're going to add our orange cello. And then we're going to add our modified gum syrup. You can see it's kind of thick. And then we are going to add our bourbon. So again, wine glass is 2 ounces. I'm going to pop that right in there. And then we also need to add our bitters. I'm using Angostura bitters. The original recipe calls for, I think, Botter's bitters, which is probably a brand name. Angostura is going to give you the same thing, and it has a nice red color to bring up the color of the drink. So a dash of that. So when we're talking bitters, we're talking about 6 to 8 drops. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 8.5. It's totally fine. Now we're going to put the top on the shaker, and I'm going to do my best bartender shake for you. It's not that good. It works for me though. Not gonna lie, between this and the smash, it's gonna be a pretty happy hour. I encourage you to make these drinks. Enjoy yourself at home. Join us next week for another episode of Happy Hour History when our featured spirit will be rum. And I promise not to use a pirate voice the whole time. Before we go, I do want to say a big thank you once again to Hotel Tango Distillery here in Indiana, who have been kind enough to share some of their product with us. They are open for curbside pickup, and if the store is still out of hand sanitizer, they've got that covered as well. So thank you so much for joining me today, and cheers. Oh man, that is really good. That's good. Today, our episode is, holy crap, my battery's dying.